Today we're going to talk about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. I really don't like that we know them by their Babylonian names, but the story doesn't sound right if we do it by their Hebrew names. You know, I mean, this is just one time we have to use that. So let's see what happened at the end of last chapter. So let's look at chapter 2, verse 48 and 49. Then the king promoted Daniel and gave him many gifts, and he made him ruler over the whole province of Babylon, and chief prefect over all the wise men of Babylon. And Daniel made request of the king, and he appointed Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego over the administration of the province of Babylon, while Daniel was at the king's court. So on your handout, Daniel, whose real name was Belteshazzar, Hananiah, who we know as Shadrach, Mishael, who we call Meshach, Azariah, which in our story is Abednego, they were promoted at the end of chapter 2 because Daniel was, with God's help, which he made very clear, was able to tell the king the meaning of the dream. Now, we need to know that they were promoted, they were officials, or they wouldn't have even been in front of that idol. Because in just a minute, we're going to read who the people were that were invited to this dedication. And there's no commoners listed. It has 8 different groups, and they are all people on the king's payroll, all officials in there. We kind of think that it's just all the people of the Babylon were there, but that's not what it seems like from reading the scripture. So that's why they were even there to begin with. So let's go to, how long is it going to be between 2 and 3, between chapter 2 and what's going to happen today? There is not a definite answer, but the best that I can find, according to the Septuagint, which is the Greek version of the Old Testament, the image was built in the 18th year of Nebuchadnezzar's reign. Therefore, 16 years had passed when chapter 13 starts. So, because it's in chapters, sometimes we think that chapter 2 ends and then tomorrow chapter 3 starts. But actually, they had been serving the king in an official capacity for probably 16 years when chapter 3 starts. All right, so let's look at Daniel chapter 3, verse 1. Nebuchadnezzar, the king, made an image of gold, the height of which was 60 cubits, and its width was 6 cubits. He set it up in the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. Okay, the image, it says that he made an image of gold, probably gold-plated, not gold throughout. Was it in human form? Most of the time, that word image refers to something in human form, but we can't say for sure. Most people think it was probably a likeness of Nebuchadnezzar himself. Why gold? Well, remember last week what the dream was? Remember that Nebuchadnezzar stood for the gold, the head was of gold. But I wonder, he didn't just have the gold head here, because remember in the dream there were different kingdoms that were going to take over. No, I wonder if he was trying to say, hey, that dream, I got to thinking about it. Who's to say these people are going to take us over? Because like Paul said last week, they were like nobodies at that time. So maybe he wanted to make sure everybody knew he was going to be the everlasting kingdom, and that's why he made the whole thing gold. That's just supposition on my part, but we do know it was overlaid with gold. And it was very impressive. This tells you in cubics in the Bible, but and somebody brought out the fact that it was 60 and 6, which is the number of man. So maybe he's trying to elevate himself to be a god in this. But if we put that in inches and feet, then that's going to be 90 feet tall by 9 feet wide. It probably was on a pedestal, but so I'm not really sure how much of that. This is just, that's somebody's idea. But can you imagine something that was overlaid with gold that was 90 feet tall? Pretty impressive, wasn't it?
Yes.
And it showed it was a display of wealth and workmanship. Okay, if the image, let's talk about the image. If it was supposed to be that of Nebuchadnezzar, which most people wanted like a statue of himself, do you think Nebuchadnezzar was 90 feet tall? No. No. In fact, he was making it an improved version of Nebuchadnezzar, right? He wanted, well, let's think about this. You know, if I were going to make an image of me, you know, that I wanted everybody to see, well, I would make it much younger and much thinner and much prettier, okay? But that wouldn't really be me, you know, because I'm a little older and a little, you know, and other things. So the question is, we're not out to build an idol or an image of ourselves, but do you know we do have an image of ourselves? An image of us is what we portray to other people. Do we ever try to make people think we're something we're not? You know, I mean, think about it. That's not much different than what Nebuchadnezzar is doing. Why don't we try to adjust what we really are to what, you know, we should have people think so that we don't have to pretend? Why don't we do that? So I'm asking you, people do this all the time. Is the image, do I have to act differently around other people than I really am to my family and at home? And if I do that, then why don't I change? You know, why don't I say, God, this is what I want to be. Help me to be there. Now, am I saying, we can take this too far to some degree, because we can say, well, if you're saying that you need to be what you are, does that mean like, yeah, I washed my hair before I came today. You know, I put on clean clothes. I don't always go around in a dress at home, right? So no, that's okay to put your best foot forward. I think we should. The only thing that you have to make sure is it's your foot you're putting forward, okay? So that's fine to be the best you can be, and you should be nice and polite to people, but why don't we be nice and polite to people all the time? You know, why don't we be loving when people maybe aren't so lovable, you know? So let's just remember that, and that's the question I have there. Is the image that I'm projecting to other people, is that real? Is that the real me? Or am I like Nebuchadnezzar, trying to be different than what I really am? All right, let's continue. What was the Babylonian mentality? You know what they thought? This was going to, they got it from Isaiah. It says, I am, and there is none besides me. Isaiah 47:10. Oh, wow. Have you ever heard anybody? Usually people don't say that. But they live by that, don't they? I am, and there's none besides me. Who's more important than me? You know what it is today? Today, we say it's all about us, isn't we? Have you noticed that? Today's mentality, it's all about me. It's all about me. Especially the younger generation, you know, they kind of have it easier than a lot of people in the past. And it's all about me. But do you think that's what God wants it to be? You know what? It's all about Jesus. All right, let's go to Daniel 3 verse 2. Then Nebuchadnezzar, the king, sent word to assemble the satraps, the prefects, the governors, the counselors, the treasurers, the judges, and the magistrates, and all the rulers of the province. Okay, he's calling all these different groups of people in the government to do what? What's the next two words? To come to. That's all he says. Just come to the dedication. He doesn't say anything about falling down in worship. He says just come to the dedication of the image that Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up. Okay, so they think that they're just coming. There are 8 classes of officials. They're listed in descending order of importance. All invited to come were VIPs. There were probably no ordinary citizens there. Then the satraps, the prefects, the governors, the counselors, the treasurers, the judges, the magistrates, and all the rulers of the provinces were assembled for, what for? For the dedication of the image that Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up. And they stood before the image that Nebuchadnezzar had set up. This in verse 1, it says, was in the plain of Dura. That was a very flat plain. And some Bible scholars said that you could probably see an image that size for 15 miles away. So that's something to be able to see that. You want to make sure it was big. All right, so they're all there. And they think they've just come maybe like to give, this is a thing that we're doing for the government. No idea that it's going to be a worship thing, just political. Number 4, then the herald loudly proclaimed, to you the command is given, O peoples, nations, and men of every language. Parentheses, there were probably some people from other countries there that were working kind of like ambassadors, and they were there too, and that's why this is different. That at the moment that you hear the sound of the horn, the flute, the lyre, the trigon, the psaltery, the bagpipe, and all kinds of music, you are to fall down and what? Worship the golden image that Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Wow, that puts a whole different light on something, doesn't it? We could go to the dedication of something just as a statue, but if they said to worship it, that's a whole different thing. The worship brings now in a religious significance. First it was political, and now it's religious. All right, so now they find out they had to worship, and that this is a political thing going on now. Notice that the music was involved. There was a big orchestra. Why do you think they had music? Why do we have music in church? Because it's moving, it's powerful, it's emotionally moving. It sets the tone for worship, doesn't it? I mean, for some people, if you have the right music, you can just get so touched by that. If it's got powerful words about God, and I know you all know there are songs like that, that when you're down or you want to thank God or whatever, it just comes to your mind. And your worship can flow out of the music. So they've got this big orchestra there to get everybody ready for the worship experience that they're about to have. So that's what's happening there. Now, is this obligatory? Or can they say, if you don't worship another God, no. There is no option for getting out of this. In fact, let's look in chapter 3, verse 6. What happened if they did not comply? But whoever does not fall down and worship shall immediately, I mean, there's not going to be a trial and we'll come get you later. Immediately, they will be cast into the midst of a furnace of blazing fire. What I can find out is that this is the first time that in history that they can find, even historical records, this wasn't a usual way to punish people or to kill them. So I don't know if this is just something at the last moment that Nebuchadnezzar thought he would come up with or what. But it would work. It would definitely work. Therefore, at that time, when all the peoples heard the sound of the horn, the flute, the lyre, the trigon, the psaltery, the bagpipe, and all kinds of music, all the peoples, nations, and men of every language fell down and worshipped the golden image that Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up. For this reason, at that time, certain Chaldeans came forward and brought charges against the Jews. So what do you think the problem was? Number 10, did everyone bow down? No, they did not. And of course, they were the Jews. The ones we're referring to are Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Let's talk about the Chaldeans for just a minute. Did you notice? Let's see. Let me read what they say and then we'll talk about them. They responded and said to Nebuchadnezzar, the king, O king, live forever. Okay, so they're starting out with their little flattery here. You yourself, O king, have made a decree. First of all, I'm thinking, he just did it. Do they think he's dumb? No, they know he knows what he said, but they're kind of like putting it back in his face just to make sure. You've made a decree that every man who hears the sound of the horn, the flute, the lyre, the trigon, psaltery, and the bagpipe, and all kinds of music is to fall down and worship the golden image. But whoever does not fall down and worship shall be cast into the midst of a furnace of blazing fire. How do you like it when people come to you and they start out what they're going to say with, you said? You know, as a teacher, I hate that. Well, you said, then I'm going, did I really say that? I have to listen very carefully. But they're reminding him of what he said so that he kind of like can't get out of it. There are certain Jews, like why don't you just say there's certain people? Why would he say certain Jews? I mean, they're already anti-Semitic then. Do you know why? You know, they resented them because the Jews were brought, like they were captured. They were captives. So why would you bring somebody that you've captured? They should be in servitude. They should be serving everybody. They're slaves. But no, King Nebuchadnezzar has taken these Jews, certain Jews, and put them in authority in the kingdom. And they've been doing that for probably 16 plus years. Maybe even over these Chaldeans, or sometimes these are called astrologers or magicians. They didn't like it at all. They were jealous and they resented them. Can you tell by their tone? There are certain Jews whom you have appointed, reminding him, this is your deal, over the administration of the province of Babylon, namely, and have you ever noticed, sometimes people just really enjoy telling on other people. Haven't you noticed that? It's fun for them, and they're enjoying this. Namely, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These men, O king, have disregarded you. 3 things that they say they're guilty of. Number 1, they have disregarded the king, and that is very big because the king, remember, he thinks he's full of pride or he wouldn't want to be worshipped. Number 2, they do not serve your gods. That's true. Number 3, they did not worship the golden image which you have set up. All right, so number 11, who did not, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. What do you think about the motive? I think they were jealous, don't you? That's why they wanted to tell. What did the 3 men tell the king? So what the king does, first of all, look at how he responds. I know that you noticed last in chapter 1 and 2, how would you describe the emotional state of King Nebuchadnezzar? Would he be somebody you'd probably want to be married to? I mean, he gets mad really quick. He's full of pride, and look at this. And then Nebuchadnezzar in rage and anger. It's not just enough to say rage. They had to use 2 words to show how upset he was. So I think that he flew off at the handle very quick. He gave orders to bring Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Now, did you notice he said, bring them to me? He didn't say, well, toss them in the fire. Why do you think he did that? I think he liked them. He respected them. They had been doing a good job. And although he's very mad, could they really do that? So he calls them to him. He said he had them bring before the king. Then he said to them, is it true? So at least he does ask them, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods or worship the golden image that I have set up. Do you remember at the end of last week? Paul said, remember how Nebuchadnezzar said, oh, Daniel's God is so great. He could tell the meaning of my dream. And he went on and he was like, sounds like he was praising God. And Paul said, was Nebuchadnezzar saved? And the answer is no. And I know he's not. See, look. He said he's worshiping other gods still. What he was doing was saying, yeah, that God is good too. But he was not claiming him as his God. And it's evident right here. He said, now if you're ready, I'll give you another chance. Guys, I like you. You're doing a good job. I'll give you another chance. Maybe you're slow. You didn't understand what we do here in Babylon. If you're ready, at the moment that you hear the sound of the horn, the flute, the lyre, the trigon, the psaltery, and the bagpipe, and all kinds of music to fall down and worship the image that I have set up, that I have made very well. But if you will not worship, you will immediately be cast into the furnace of blazing fire. Oh, look at this. This rhetorical question. He goes, and what God is there who can deliver you out of my hands? He thought that was like a ridiculous thing. And what God is there that can deliver you out of my hands? Because I am mightier than all the gods. Well, that was a rhetorical question to that's what he put it out as, but as it wasn't to them. They had an answer for him. Notice in verse 16, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said, you know what's good? It doesn't say that they said, King, could you just give us a few minutes to talk about this? Let us huddle over there. They didn't. You know, they knew what they were going to say. You know why they knew what they were going to say? What happened in chapter 1? Did they not already get a temptation to eat the food that was going to be served to idols? And what did they do? They said no. You know, little victories, if we decide right now, little victories prepare us for big trials. But on the other hand, just because we get a check on that little quiz, it doesn't mean that we're going to automatically, you know, it's going to be easy when we get the big test. So first of all, we have to decide, which I know Paul talked about this, and it's such a good point. We need to decide right now, before it comes, what we're going to do. They said, "O Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to give you an answer concerning this, but we're going to anyway. If it be so, God whom we serve is able. Our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the furnace. And he is to deliver us out of your hand." He can do that. Our God. You said who can do that? Our God can. He is able, and I know he has got all the power to do so. But, look at number 18. Even if he does not, let it be known to you, O king, that we are not going to serve your gods or worship the golden image that you have set up. They said, we know God is able, but we don't really know what God's will is. Sometimes it might be better that he not deliver us from the fiery furnace. But it doesn't matter. I don't know what God wants to do, but I know he can do that. And you know, they were not, this you can refer back to Exodus 20, verse 3, you shall have no other gods before me. Verse 4, you shall not make for yourself an idol or any likeness of what is in heaven above or on the earth beneath or under the earth. Number 5, you shall not worship them or serve them. For I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God. That's what they were going by. They will not do that. But they said, even if we don't, we're willing to die. Put us in the fiery furnace. They have decided their loyalty was to God. Okay. One thing I forgot to tell you was, you know, the Chaldeans, when they came, it said that they brought accusations. That Greek word meant to tear in pieces. They literally, I mean, you got the idea they weren't friendly toward them. But their words, I can't say it with enough nastiness. Because if you go back to the original language, it's saying their words were tearing Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego apart in pieces. All right, so let's keep going. Let me ask you this. This is, you got number 14. What about you? What would you do? Would you bow or take a stand? Do people know you even go to church? Or is that a secret? For some people, that's a secret. If we can't even do that, how do you think we're going to stand if they say, are you a disciple of Jesus? Really? You know, so this is something we need to make sure, decide what we're going to do and let people know that when the tough gets really big, then we already have decided what we're going to do. All right, so let's continue. How loyal are you to God? Loyalty is decided in advance. It should be a way of life. It should be automatic. So the king, chapter 3, verse 19, he is livid. He says, then Nebuchadnezzar was filled with wrath. He was already mad. Now he's filled with wrath and rage. And his facial expression was altered. Oh my goodness. I wish that my facial expression would not get altered when, you know, people have told me before that I don't have to say a word, because I told you I don't really have to say my opinion and I don't have to argue with people, but they said I don't have to say a word. My facial expression says everything. And many times I'm telling myself, don't change your expression, Claudia, don't change your expression. But the king could not do that. He was so mad. Have you ever seen somebody so mad their facial expression changes? He was so mad at them, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, he answered by giving orders to heat up the furnace 7 times more than it usually was heated. Okay, he was so mad he wasn't even thinking straight. He really had a problem with anger. He really needed to go get some counseling over this, okay? Because what is that going to do? If you wanted to really punish somebody, would you put them in a slow burn or would you make it 7 times hotter? 7 times hotter, they're just going to be burned up faster. You know, what he should have said if he's really mad, he should have said, calm it down, make it enough to where they'll last for a long time and feel every flame in there. But he was so mad he wasn't even making sense. He said, make it 7 times hotter. And he commanded certain valiant warriors who were in his army to tie up. I'm not really sure why they needed to be tied up. It doesn't say they were trying to escape, but he wants them tied up. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, in order to cast them into the furnace of the blazing fire. Then, verse 21, these men were tied up in their trousers. This is interesting how they list what all their garments they had on. Their trousers, their coats, their caps, and other clothes, and were cast into the midst of the furnace of blazing fire. Normally, before something happened to people, they would at least take their outer clothes off of them. So either the king left them on because clothes are going to burn faster than flesh, or more likely, I think it's he was just so mad, he wasn't even going to take the time to do that. He said, tie them up and toss them in. For this reason, verse 22, because the king's command was urgent. Why was it so urgent? Because he was so mad. And the furnace had been made extremely hot. The flame of the fire slew those men who carried up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. It was so hot. They said the furnace probably had the opening at the top, and then it had, you could see through where there was a place where you could get the what do you call the little burning embers out of it? But you would take them and throw whatever, like put the fire into the top of it. And that's what they were doing. They were carrying them up there and throwing them. When they threw them over, those flames leaped out and killed those special valiant men that he picked out to do that. All right, so there's no question that the fire was hot enough, okay, because it already got them. All right, so let's look at number 13. We know that. Number 14. So let's see what happens in the Bible when we look at verse 23. These 3 men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, fell into the midst of the furnace of blazing fire, still tied up. 24. Then Nebuchadnezzar the king was astounded and stood up in haste. He responded and said to his high officials, was it not 3 men we cast bound into the midst of the fire? He's probably thinking, I'm so mad, but I know surely there were just 3 men that were there. They answered to the king, certainly, O king. He said, look, I see 4 men loosed and walking about in the midst of the fire without harm. And the appearance of the 4th is like a son of the gods. It was like something he'd never seen. Literally, it was translated, it was like a deity. It was like a deity. He really didn't know what it was, but he knew son of the deity is how it could have been an angel, or it could have been a theophany, which means the appearance of Jesus that was right there in the flames with them. Either way, if I'm in trouble, I'll take an angel. I mean, it'd be wonderful for Jesus to come, but I'll take whatever I can get from God wants to send to help me. And we can't really say for sure, but I think a lot of people think that it was probably Jesus himself that was there with him. Okay, notice something else. It says that not only are there 4, but they're walking around. I thought they were tied up. Tied up. Okay, so the only thing that has burned on them are the ropes. Maybe that's why God had him tie them up. Because people can't say, well, the flame wasn't hot enough to hurt. Well, it was hot enough to burn those ropes off. Let's see. So he is so shocked that he goes up, and again, he calls out. He's the boss man. He gets up close enough to the door, number 26, came near to the door of the furnace of blazing fire. He responded, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, come out. You servants of the Most High God. Boy, that sounds like he's going to be saved now, doesn't it? Well, it sounds like that. Come here. Then Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came out of the midst of the fire. What about that fourth person? Why didn't he come out? Because Nebuchadnezzar is not his boss. And he doesn't do what Nebuchadnezzar says. So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego come out. He calls them out. They come out. What happened? He said, and the satraps, the prefects, the governors, and the king's high officials gathered around and saw in regard. I mean, everybody there was talking about this. I mean, what happens when you see a police with lights on at Walmart, I mean, if my daughter's here, we have to keep circling to see what's happening. Did they find somebody that was stealing or whatever? You know how we do that? But can you imagine? Everybody knew what was going on. So now there's this they hear him shout, come out, and to see these men walk out, this wasn't just for the king Nebuchadnezzar. Everybody knew what was going on. They gathered around and saw in regard to these men that the fire had what effect? No effect on the bodies of these men, nor was a head of their hair singed. You can even get close to it when you're cooking something on the grill. You can singe your hair like that, just getting close to it. Nor were their trousers damaged, nor had the smell of fire even been up on them. Wow, I mean, it's like miracle after miracle after miracle. Nebuchadnezzar responded and said, Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and delivered his servants, who put their trust in him, violating the king's command, and yielded up their bodies so as not to serve or worship any god except their own God. Yeah, he was right there. Yeah, he's right there, but he couldn't deny it. Therefore, I make a decree that any people, nation, or tongue that speaks anything offensive against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shall be torn limb from limb and their houses reduced to a rubbish heap. Inasmuch as there is no other God who is able to deliver in this way. Then the king caused Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego to prosper in the province of Babylon. So what was the result of their faith in God? Nebuchadnezzar claimed that God was the one true God, but, like we say, the devils know that. No, I don't think he was saved. He declared punishment on those who talked against him. They were promoted again. This is the last time we read about them. You might be wondering, what about Daniel? He was an official. We know number one, I can tell you this, if he were there, he would not have bowed. So there are several things that we can guess. We don't know for sure. Some people say maybe Daniel was so high up in the administration that the king didn't even ask him to go. Or maybe he was out of town on some state business. Or, this was something interesting I just read this past week. Somebody suggested that he was there, but because he was so high up and they all knew that Daniel was a favorite of the king, that they were not going to call the kings. In other words, you may tell on somebody that you don't think the king is the favorite, but you're not going to go tell on the king's right-hand man, because that could get you. It's like, well, are you complaining about Daniel to me? Are you kidding me? Okay, y'all are going to be thrown in the fire. So whatever it was, we know that Daniel would not have bowed. Can't say for sure why he wasn't there. So we can ask a few things. How close is the real image to me of what I portray? How loyal am I to God? What would it take to get me to cave? Do others see the greatness of God through my actions? I thought this book had some really good principles. It said, God can and does use miracles to save the lives of his people. When God delivers us from harm, the purpose is for his glory as much as our safety. There are three things that we can do. There's three ways that God can answer. Whenever we face a fiery furnace trial, he can deliver us to where we don't even have to go in. God could have made Nebuchadnezzar say, well, I'm going to give you all special exemption. But that's not what happened. Sometimes you think something's going to happen and it doesn't. So, okay, we get a check mark. Or he could have said, you're going to go in, but I'm going to keep you safe. You're going to have to fight this, but I will be there with you the whole way. The whole way, I'll be there with you. Sometimes God answers by saying, you will go through the fire, and in the fire, I will perfect you. I will say yes and be good to you by bringing you to heaven so that you can quit fighting. Now, that's not what we want to hear, but we're thinking of it from our standpoint. Charles Stanley said, trust God, obey Him, leave the consequences to Him.
Amen.
He'll take care of us. One other thing I read, and then I've got a song I want to play. It said, some people, when they're facing a fiery furnace, they think it's being faithful by asking God to deliver them the whole time as they're being burned up. No. What's really being faithful to God is saying, either way, I trust you, God. If you don't get me out of this, I trust you because I know where I'll be. And if you want to get me out of this, I trust you. Whatever, I trust you.
Well, here below, it's good to know He's still in the fire.